Thank you, Cindy. And as we say in the biz, the technical term is right back at you. This is an amazing network, and I had been in academia for decades, I struggle to say. And as one student said, Dr. Campbell, you're a little farther along on life's journey. Thank you. Graying. And I had many, many wonderful professional connections over the years, but really when I got into that conversation that Cindy has just described to you, I found just exactly what she said. No question of it. And I also found a place where all of the things I was interested in could find a home together. That's hard to do in academia. We like to dig in, and that's a good thing. I mean, I would like my brain surgeon to have specialized in brain anatomy. And I always think when I think about Wikipedia and how much I love it, that I really don't want my brain surgeon consulting it because we don't need to know anything anymore. I don't believe that that's true. That said, I hope when it comes time to open up the cranium that my brain surgeon knows something about what it means to be a whole person, something about what it means to be interested and curious, the things we do with our brains when they're working well. And I haven't found a more stimulating or comprehensive experience of what brains and hearts together can do than in the networks that Cindy was describing, of which she is a very, very valuable part. So you've got a mighty fine node on the network right here at USC Upstate. And it's a real privilege to be here. Of course, my computer is being a little fussy this morning, so if all of my wonderfully mediated moments don't quite do what they're supposed to, I will simply describe to you what the movie would have been. But let's hope things go well, and let's start with Richard Feynman. All right, you don't believe me? Believe Richard Feynman. How many of you remember Richard Feynman at the Challenger investigation when he dunks the piece of O-ring rubber in the water? Just saying, I think maybe the low temperatures had something to do with the explosion, people, and he pulls it out and he snaps it because it's lost its elasticity. It took a Nobel Prize winning physicist to cut through all of the bureaucratic, what's the polite word? Bureaucracy, and in that moment say, look, let's be honest about what's happening here. And I so value the example of his honesty. The books that he's written that have meant the most to me are Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman. Also, What Do You Care What Other People Think? And finally, Perfectly Reasonable Deviations from the Beaten Track. Now, this is a person that we can look to as a hero, I think, in an age where it becomes very difficult to tell some of the truths we need to tell about where we are as institutions of higher education, what we do as learners, what we do as teachers, what we do as scholars. So I thought I would start with a little bit of classic feisty Feynman. He's down at the University of Auckland. And is that feedback that's starting? Am I really Robert Plant? Can I? No? Okay.
You don't need the mic if you're Robert Plant.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. I'll be Leonard Nimoy if I can't be Robert Plant. So, at any rate, here he is at the University of Auckland, and he is telling his audience that it's time to think about quantum physics. And if you're going to think about quantum mechanics and the way the universe is put together, you better strap in. You better not expect to be told easy things. And of course, it's not just what he says, it's the way he says it. So let's see if we can get Dr. Feynman, a curious character by his own admission, to get us launched today. Let me get the mouse over and voila. Who knows what the audience was feeling like? Challenged, I hope. I heard them laugh, so that was good. And I can't tell you what it's really like in terms of the ultimate answers having to do with teaching, learning, and information and communication technologies. But what I hope to do is sketch out some of the stuff that's out there, happening, whether we like it or participate in it or not. I'm not going to simplify it for you. It's the complexity that most fascinates me and sometimes daunts me as well. I have a huge appetite for this stuff, and there are days I wake up and I think, oh my gosh, you're kidding. Another fascinating worldwide communication phenomenon? Please, couldn't we go back to Huntley Brinkley? There are days you get that feeling, but I think that the worst thing we can do is try to simplify it. To try to say, no, really, it's just like everything we already knew, it's just now got wires attached. It's not the case. Things are really taking quite a turn in human civilization. Clay Shirky in 2008 wrote words that are still true about where we sit as human beings. It's our species, people. We are living in the middle of the largest increase in expressive capability in the history of the human race. And expressive capability is why we were not swallowed whole by the animals with sharper claws and bigger teeth when we came down out of the trees in the savannah in our early evolutionary past. John Medina of Brain Rules says it was kind of sad for our species. We came down out of those trees and on the backs we said, hey, we're prey, enjoy, snack time. But we were smarter. We knew what symbolic representation was. We didn't simply have to point at things and grunt. We actually developed language. We developed ways of sharing experience with each other. This is not just about cool Google doodles. This is about the core of what makes us human beings. It's why we're inside in climate-controlled conditions right now and not huddled outside around a campfire pointing and grunting. Well, fire itself, no, it would not be even that civilized. That expressive capability is what we're talking about at the core of all that we do. It's why we have medicine. It's why we have literature. It's why we have engineering. It's all about expressive capability. If this is right, and I think it is, this is a fundamental turning point in human civilization. I do not think you can exaggerate the scale of this moment. But we tend to reduce what we see to what we already knew. That's, of course, part also of what it means to be human. We talk about getting outside of the box. It's even hard to get outside the cliche of getting outside of the box. I mean, it's as if every new idea we have stops us in our tracks and we say, oh, okay, fine, that's enough. Been there, done that. Sometimes our students feel that way. So I think when we think about the internet and this increase in expressive capability, sometimes we're really thinking about this. Isn't the internet a wonderful thing? All those documents going around, all that fluidity of shuffling paper, and our desktops, and our files, and our folders, and all those very obedient young people. They know how to go to a course management site. They can click on things and download them. Sometimes they wear cool sweaters. Look at that. This is a high-functioning machine. Civilization at its finest. And then, it's Al Gore. No, just kidding. It's someone in charge of learning analytics to make sure that everything is on time, all the behaviors have occurred just as they should occur, and that everyone is faithfully doing their duty. Or not. So there you go. We think about the internet the way we think about a huge paper-deluged office. And to make more efficient use of the internet, we use computers to do more intricate kinds of color coding on the files that are taken around by the obedient young people who sneak away and watch things when we're not giving them good constructive tasks as learners. It's very hard to get out of that. That, by the way, is a clip from Brazil, which when I first saw it in the 1980s, I could not understand because I didn't know what a soul-numbing thing bureaucracy could be. Now I do. Now I watch this and I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Here's Senator Ted Stevens. He was having a hard time with the internet as well, you may recall.
And again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
This was when he was talking about network neutrality and how we can't be clogging the tubes with all of this stuff. And of course, everybody at a college campus knows that the tubes do get clogged with all the downloading that students are doing and so forth. But I mean, poor Senator Stevens, yet you can see it's the same problem, right? How can we think of this thing in the way that the scale and the transformative potential really do indicate we should think? Well, it's difficult to do. So Here's the internet, again, from this movie Brazil, as a set of tubes. So there he is. He has his personal computer. So he saved his file. And there he goes. It's a set of tubes. And because the internet is very fast, we get an answer back very quickly. And we see an early instance of identity management gone awry, which is really what Brazil is all about. So you can see we have some difficulties. This is what the internet looks like. It's not tubes. It's not a document delivery system. This is actually one of the most exciting and intriguing global learning systems that I have seen. It's a graphical representation of a thing called Wikipedia Vision. Any of you heard of Wikipedia Vision? Show you Wikipedia Vision. Why, let's go out to the World Wide Web. And it is in beta, which means they're still working on it, which is good. And if it picks up here in a minute, you'll be able, oh, there it's going. You can see it. You just have to, let's zoom out a little bit here. Good. This is a graphical representation, more or less in real time, of the anonymous edits being made to Wikipedia all around the world. Only the English version. Of course, there are many other languages of Wikipedia as well. And each one of those little balloons, we might call them a learning balloon, has a link to the article that's being edited. It also has a link to this little DIFF, which is the thing that shows you the difference between the prior version of Wikipedia and the new version as a result of the edit. So the next time you want to look at some interesting worldwide global nervous system action, make sure you're not logged in. You need to be anonymous for this to work because it feeds off of IP addresses. And make an edit to your favorite Wikipedia article that neither has a comma splice or a dangling modifier if you're into the English geekery, or they haven't quite explained what they need to explain quite the way they should, or have your students do this. Have an edit-a-thon. That's how I learned about it. It was a story in the New Yorker magazine about a bunch of people getting together at the British Library, staying indoors during a perfectly wonderful, glorious summer day in England, and they just started editing things. And you could see, the writer said, an uptick in Wikipedia vision. This is not a bunch of people running around an office. This is not a set of pneumatic tubes carrying messages back and forth. This is humanity in the middle of the largest increase in expressive capability in the history of the human race, building the most impressive reference work human beings have ever built. Reference work being another name for the human record. Is it perfect? No. Only a miracle. But it's hard to keep that in mind. And that's nothing new. A book that I read this summer and have completely fallen in love with, Invention, The Care and Feeding of Ideas by Norbert Wiener, one of the fathers of the computer age, has this wonderful story in which Wiener says it is not the exception but the rule for new tools to be undervalued or at least misvalued. And awakening the digital imagination is about not under or misvaluing this thing we call computers. Now, that was a new invention, 150 years ago or so. Anybody recognize it? You know what it is? Very simple. I always ask very simple questions. I'm a bear of relatively little brain. What is it? Take a stab. What is it? Can you tell? Right. Yeah, it's just an electric motor, actually. Yeah, look, yeah, it sort of looks like a potentiometer as well, but it turns out that's an axle. But yeah, you're right there. It's an electric motor. We take this for granted. But it wasn't always that way. Back in the day, Norbert Wiener tells us, steam and oil-fired engines powered factories. And because steam engines tend to be huge and oil engines need to be huge, they would have one big engine in the factory, and the drivetrain would be all these belts and pulleys going all over the place. Really elaborate and dangerous things, because a worker who got too close to the drives and the pulleys could be snapped back into them, killed. Oil dripping everywhere, steam in these great big cauldrons, potentially injuring folks because of the way it was put together. These were factories. They were using this incredible mechanical engineering, and they were doing the best they could, but when they got to electric motors, what they thought was, right, we'll get a big electric motor and put it in the center of the factory and connect it to the drives and the pulleys. But somebody got the idea, maybe not. Maybe what we need to do is come up with a lot of small electric motors. We can do that. And put the motors with the devices instead of a big, big motor in the middle of the factory. Wiener says it is what we may call the inverse process of invention, which is what I think we are called to as educators with these computers. It is just as truly a work of invention or discovery to find out what we are able to accomplish by the use of these new tools, as it is to search for the tools which will make possible a specific new device or method. We have not yet taken our computers out of the steam and oil engine paradigm. We hook up these massive central devices and have belts and pulleys going everywhere, and we end up with Brazil. Wiener then puts his finger right on it. The question that this act of invention, this reverse process of invention, answered was not, how can I run such and such an existing factory most effectively, but rather, what is the real meaning and the appropriate function of the electric motor itself? And we have not yet gotten to that, I don't think, with computers in education, or at least only patchily. But that's the question that we need to answer. What is the real meaning and the appropriate function of the interactive networked computer? People have been working on this a long time. In 1999, a book on information technology literacy, being fluent with information technology, is published. And the stirring words are published right in there with it. Further, the committee believes that successful implementation of fit fluency in information technology instruction will require serious rethinking of the college and university curriculum. We haven't seen that serious rethinking. No, we have not. We see people nibble around the edges with a new belt or a new pulley, and that's better than nothing, but not much better. Seymour Papert, in a paper called Why School Reform is Impossible, which I read every now and then just to make sure I don't get too Pollyanna-ish about the whole thing, he wrote, before the computer could change school, school changed the computer. And I think that's true. Because we're using computers based on this paradigm of learning far too often. Somebody know what this is? It's a Skinner box, right? It's operant conditioning. What you do is starve the rat, put the rat in an impoverished environment, and train the rat to press a lever several times so that the rat will get food. I show this to my students and I say, so what's this lever you're pressing? And they say, credit hours. And I say, how many credit hours does it take to get the pellet of food, which is what? The degree. And they'll say 122. And I'll say, how many times do you press the lever to be educated? And they don't have an answer for that. There is no answer for that. And the electrified grid, well, I guess that might be the GPA. It's a sad metaphor. And here's a classroom, which looks a little bit like a Skinner box. We don't have a habitat. That's what we want. That's what with these personal networked interactive computers we could have. Instead, we have a habit trail. Very easy to manage. A set of tubes. Something with clear learning outcomes. A straight path from A to B. Everything visible, everything orderly. No mess. But learning isn't like that. Learning is more like this. This is from the internet. Can you believe it? It's free, open source software. It's a discussion forum with all these little things in there that most folks would describe as frills. To me, they're the essence of what we should be doing. You've got avatars, small graphical representations of identity. You've got all the opportunities students want to hook what they're doing in the forum to other expressions of their capabilities on the internet. And this particular forum was interesting. This doesn't always happen, but you can't see the dates. The dates are October 2008. This was for a class that was over in May of 2008. I had moved to Texas already. And the students, those silly students, they kept going to the class forum. Why? Because it wasn't the class forum now, it was their forum. This particular thread was started by one of the students who asked that question you always want students to ask, which is, do you all ever connect what we're doing in this class with what happens in real life? And the first answer was, hell's bells, yes. And they went on from there. That was not a prompt. I did not give them that assignment. My assignment was post, be robust, be significant, be interesting. Do it twice a week. Reinforce your learning. That was it. But if anyone within the class was going to get that ball rolling, someone might. And in this case, someone did. This is what we usually have. This is the Brazil version of the discussion forum. This is what our students see. It looks like an email inbox. Everybody in love with their email inbox in here? I don't think so. It's transactional, not relational. I mean, look, compare. Festive, colorful, full of personal expression. Dum bum 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 ba-dum. No, not so good. Or online learning. Very depressing story in the New York Times about online learning. You can see here that what he's doing is faithfully copying down what the teacher is copying down, which he can watch on the television on his laptop back in his dorm room. Wow. And I love the way the pen and the chalk kind of line up. It's got this really interesting no, I'm just kidding. It's really depressing. And we end up with the University of Name Here. You can go out on the internet and buy all sorts of things, including a degree. But there it is, the University of Name Here. Custom-made fake diplomas, fake college degrees, and transcripts. We custom design and create fake diploma and fake degree, so whatever your requirements may be, we can create high-quality documents to meet your specifications, etc. Now, I don't want to say that this constitutes the college experience for all of our students. I don't think it does. But if you really get them to where they're willing to open up and talk to you about their experience, aside from the few transformative classes they have, overall, they're all about pressing that lever. And sometimes they get angry when you try to talk to them about other ways. They'll say, well, you're tricking me. Where's the lever? I need to start pressing it. I've been in school before. I know what I should be doing. I'm going for the University of Name Here. One more lengthy quote from Wiener, but I want to read it with you. It was a period in which there was a real and justified growth of ideas of automation. This new step, though it contained certain justifiable elements, was carried out largely by those who had a peculiar intellectual and spiritual preference for machine ways of thought. They hoped, and I do not think they always hoped unconsciously, that the new machines, that the big organization would replace the need for individual thoughtfulness and would remove the continual threat of the freelance scientist and the person of small demands against the supremacy of established position and authority. In accomplishing this, they used a considerable amount of double talk, which I think it is necessary for us to analyze. And unfortunately, I think a lot of talk about education is double talk that we should be analyzing. It's about the belts and the pulleys, not about expressive capability. It's paying 24 talented students $100,000 not to attend college, because he wants them to do things that are interesting, to have mentors and further develop their ideas. I thought that's what happened in a university. Well, he doesn't think so. We're learning that things are not the way we thought. Our brains are a mess. Good. This is a beautiful article in Scientific American Mind from earlier in this year, talking about a quality called cognitive disinhibition. And I hope you remember Feynman at the beginning, right? Because it's going to make your head hurt a little bit. It turns out that to be creative and innovative, you don't need better filters, you need fewer filters. But filters are what we crave because we can't pay attention to everything. But it turns out that the more usefully you can let those filters down, and there are ways in which you can do that, I hope to explore them today, the greater the chances that you're going to make connections, you're going to come up with new ideas, you're going to be creative. Now, sometimes cognitively disinhibited people are not fun to be around because we want to get on with our work. There are belts and pulleys to attend to, and I don't want the world to come to a screeching halt because of the cognitive disinhibition of that brain surgeon again. But in higher education, it seems to me we have a moral responsibility to think as carefully as we can about what it is that makes brains most creative, that helps learning flourish most abundantly, and be of the most use for civilization. Or cognitive disfluency. Wildly counterintuitive. I love the name of this article, Fortune Favors the Bold, and the italicized. Effects of disfluency on educational outcomes. When you put weird stuff in the lesson plan, they remember it longer. Not just because it's startling, but because if it's all explained, if it's all flattened out, the brain just stops. The brain says, oh, right, good, been there, done that, and it just goes away. So a few distractors, a few bits of disfluency, a brief chorus of Stairway to Heaven, whatever. It turns out this actually helps the learner. And believe you me, I have labored over my syllabi, just the way you have. I read with horror these stories that say, better to be like Kate Smith than Kate Moss with your syllabi, meaning that you need to make your syllabus as long as possible, anticipating every possible legal challenge to your grade, saying what every assignment means, explaining it all. It turns out that that inhibits learning. It turns out that it actually harms the learner. And we're just trying to be rigorous and do due diligence. Cognitive disinhibition, cognitive disfluency starts to look like the internet in interesting ways. Back to Brain Rules. I really do recommend this book to you. It's a great read, as we say in the business. Beautiful analogies, very stimulating. And this is one of the brain rules. We are powerful and natural explorers. That's what we do. When the exploration isn't there, we are not at our best. We are not even ourselves as a species. We have sequenced the genome. We're just now starting to think about the connectome. This is a picture of the internet. It's also a picture of synaptic connectivity within our brains. More potential connections in our brains than there are stars in the observable universe. And we just want to make straight paths and tubes? No. The connectome actually maps with very complex kinds of visualization, the potential for connection and the way we are as a result of those connections. And this is a TED Talk, and it's free, and it's online, and I recommend it to you. Louis Pasteur says, chance favors the prepared mind, and it's true. I want my students to be prepared for class, but it's chance that favors the prepared mind, openness to experience. And Stephen Berlin Johnson takes it another step. Chance favors the connected mind. But what we build for our students to experience their education online with the most powerful set of connective tools in the history of the human race looks like a habit trail. It's closed, isolated, goes away at the end of every semester. Stephen Johnson says we think of understanding as proceeding from confusion to light bulb to clarity, or we may think of it as synthesis as a result of thesis and antithesis, but really it looks like that. And I recommend all of his books to you, but The Invention of Air and Where Good Ideas Come From have been particularly inspiring for me. This is a learning environment, Stephen Johnson says. Coffee house in the 18th century, birthplace of the Enlightenment, partly because they stopped drinking ale, which has a cognitive inhibition effect, and coffee, which is a neural stimulator, but also because people from all walks of life met in these spaces and got into really unruly conversations out of which our modern age emerged. So what is this electric motor? What is this thing that we have in our pockets, on our laps, on our desks? Alan Kay said, the most beautiful thing I've ever read about computers, that a computer is an instrument whose music is ideas. And he is himself a musician, so he's not speaking idly. I think he's got 4 different pipe organs in his house. Really a very serious musician. Also, the father of what we would call the personal computer, the laptop computer in particular. He had this idea for a Dynabook that people laughed at for a couple of decades until he got one. But think about that. When was the last time you went to a vendor table and they said, we would like you to buy our device. It is an instrument whose music is ideas. We tend not to hear that. In fact, most of the faculty I talked to have never heard this at all. I hadn't either. And I thought I knew something about educational technology. I read this about 6 years ago. You can imagine. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. That's it. That's what I was groping to articulate. If a computer is an instrument whose music is ideas, we should be using environments like this more capably than we do. This is me in the t-shirt and my students on a field trip to the virtual Sistine Chapel in Second Life, which has the added bonus of being able to fly in this environment so that we can see Michelangelo's paintings up close from the artist's point of view, moving along them with this wild sense of scale. Oh, and I should mention that we were talking to each other in stereo with Doppler effect, and they were in Waco and I was in Barcelona. Or another example, I was in California at a board meeting for the New Media Consortium. And I am privileged to sit on this board with Marco Torres, who's an Apple Distinguished Educator who does amazing things with disadvantaged inner city children in LA. Marco, I don't know how many frequent flyer miles, he racks up as many in a week as I do in a year. He goes all over the world to share what it is he's doing with these people. And there he was, we were sitting together in California, near Silicon Valley as it turns out, and we were having dinner. And Marco reached into his pocket and he pulled out one of these. And there we're all talking, we're very convivial, and he's doing this. Now, when you get to the EdTech network, we're pretty tolerant of people who just check out and do their email. We understand, etc. But he just kept doing it. And I thought, okay, that's fine. No problem here. And then I got an email. I felt a little tingle in my pocket. And I looked down and Marco had sent me an email. And that email was what he had been doing on his smartphone. He had been taking photographs and drawing portraits of everyone at the table to give us as gifts. So of course, I immediately sent the portrait he had sent to me to my daughter back in Waco, Texas, who, as it turns out, was with a group of her friends. And she texts me back and she says, whoa, everyone here just freaked out. Did he make that from a picture or what? And because I'm a geek, I knew the answer because I'd asked Marco. I had said the same thing. Whoa, how did you do that? And I text Jenny back and I say, yep, 3 apps, Photogene, Toon Paint, and brushes on top of a photo. Now, peel that onion a little bit. I'm in California with a colleague with a smartphone who creates a work of art, shares it with me at the table, not by just showing it to me, but by giving me a digital copy of it, which I can then send via text messaging to my daughter thousands of miles away, who shares it in the immediate circle she's in, face to face, the virtual world and the physical world blending, and these, I don't know what to call them, these connections, these instances of love and attention flourishing within about 10 minutes. Because, of course, then I shared the text message I'd gotten from Jenny with everyone at the table. Photogene, Toon Paint, brushes, the portrait. He did one of those for everyone at the table. Used to be we'd go to the piano and play our party piece afterwards, and that's still cool. But here was this little stealth gift that he was going to give to all of us, which I could share immediately and then share the excited response of one of my loved ones with my colleagues at the table. This is a self-reinforcing virtuous cycle that could power a learning explosion the likes of which we have never seen. But we got to get out of the office and we got to get out of the tubes. Speaking of tubes, these are not, they're balloons. This is a young woman who was bored in her math class. So she began doodling in her math class. And then she put her doodles online, on YouTube, by rigging up a camera tripod, pointing the webcam down, leaning over the tripod, and doing her doodles online. And Vi-Heart also has a complete digital identity, even to the domain name. And by the way, you know folks are buying domain names as baby presents now? It's where you live on the web. She's got all her stuff there, her blog, all the creative things she's been doing, all of these amazing things, none of which come from school assignments. It's good she survived her schooling. She only gets hundreds of thousands of hits now on YouTube. Imagine how irrelevant an A would be. Or this mental health break that popped up from Andrew Sullivan's The Daily Dish, online, of course. Eric Whitaker's virtual choir. Any of you seen that? You're about to. Not a set of tubes, but a choir. And I have to stop it because I always get very choked up as I watch this, and you didn't ask me here to get choked up in front of you. How did this happen? It happened because someone wrote the composer a fan letter. But it wasn't a fan letter, it was a fan video. Teenage young woman sang one of the parts from Whitaker's composition, Sleep, and gave it to him as a gift, posting it to YouTube, saying, Mr. Whitaker, I think your music is wonderful. I just wanted to sing this for you. And she sings it in her beautiful, I think she's 15 years old, something like that, her beautiful young voice, pure, with a kind of reverence and awe in it that catalyzed an idea in Eric Whitacre's mind. What if? What if I put my music out online for everyone to sing their parts into a webcam, which I could knit together into a virtual choir? Which he did. All those countries, all those voices brought together. And how do I know how he put it together? Because he blogged about it. He made his work visible. Isn't he afraid somebody else will steal his idea? Please, we should all steal his idea. That's why it's up there. So as he put this thing together, you'll notice that all these people are in their homes. They're in their studies, they're in their dens, they're in their offices, they're in their rec rooms, right? And there they are singing their part in a choir that they know is there, even though they can't hear it, which is a lovely metaphor for what the internet can reveal to us. And if you go to Eric Whitacre's blog and you look at the comments, even just a few days after it popped up, the one from Tom, amidst all the other languages, he writes, "I'm an old man, yet every now and then something makes me feel optimistic. This presentation did so. Please continue the experiment. You are making hope." And then, because it's the internet, if you can do it once at one scale, do it again at another scale. Version 2, now with 2,052 singers in the choir. And I don't have time to show you this video, but I urge you to go see it, because in this case, it's not a stage with the 185 singers. It's a universe with each country a planet connected by this golden braid together, singing this amazing song, Sleep. And it's not just for touchy-feely English majors either. We're having a hard time getting people interested in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and health, STEM-H. But this stuff is fantastic stuff. How to bridge that gap? John Boswell decided he would do a little thing he called the Symphony of Science. And what he did was take some of his favorite scientists, Feynman's in there and a couple of them, and he makes music out of them.
I'm not very good at singing songs, but here's a try. If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Space is good for the network of wormholes. You might merge somewhere else in space. So when the sky calls to us, we do not destroy ourselves. We will one day venture to the stars. A more glorious dawn awaits, not a sunrise, but a galaxy reverse, a morning filled with 400 billion suns. The rising of the Milky Way cosmos is full beyond measure. Elegant truths by exquisite relationships.
He's done about another 6 or 7 of those. Why? It tells an essential story of wonder and rigor that produces our heightened awareness of the complexities within us and without us in the universe. Probably a fairly good way to motivate people to do their homework if they have a sense of wonder. These videos are all free. This one in particular had an interesting afterlife. The song itself became a download from iTunes, so turned into a hit single, which was eventually pressed on vinyl as a 45 RPM record by Jack White of the White Stripes, the late lamented White Stripes now, they've broken up. But you see how this goes? When it's not tubes, when it's not an office, all of these forms blend into each other. People are not concerned about the barriers. There's something else there that can happen, a sense of wonder, like Little Big Planet. A game for the Sony PlayStation 3, but a game with a difference, a game that has with it tools for creating additional levels of the game. Okay, and then when you create an additional level for the game, you can upload it to a server. Okay, and it can be attached to your name as an author, it can be rated by the community, it can be commented on, it can be tagged. Okay, how did that work out? Well, the game was released in November 2008. By July of 2009, 1 million user-created levels have been uploaded to the server. That's one every 21 seconds since the launch of the game. February 2010, a little less than a year later, more than 2 million levels. At February 2011, 3.6 million levels. No one got paid. No one was assigned. There was no prompt. As Ted Nelson says, motivate the learner and turn the learner loose in a wonderful place. Apparently this was wonderful enough. And these levels are everything from crazy roller coaster rides to pretty sophisticated little physics experiments because of the physics engine that's built into Little Big Planet. Maybe you've heard of the Khan Academy. Just a guy with a tablet and a PC. Over 2,000 videos later, he started out trying to explain various concepts in science and math to his nephews and nieces. And now, it's this amazing repository of careful explorations of these significant concepts. But what's not always appreciated about the Khan Academy is what's the thing that drives it? What is Sal Khan's philosophy of teaching? He writes, I teach the way that I wish I was taught. The lectures are coming from me, an actual human being who's fascinated by the world around him. The concepts are conveyed as they are understood by me, not as they are written in a textbook developed by an educational bureaucracy. Viewers know that it is the labor of love of one somewhat quirky and determined man who has a passion for learning and teaching. I don't think any corporate or governmental effort, regardless of how much money is thrown at the problem, can reproduce this, one somewhat quirky and determined person who has a passion for learning and teaching. Sounds too simple, doesn't it? Sounds too basic, too naive, too innocent. Come on. We have belts, pulleys, credit hours, curricula, faculty meetings, parking. We have all these things we have to figure out. And yet quietly, making over 2,000 videos, Sal Khan gives us the Khan Academy. Context is a service we provide to each other. We are knitting together a global nervous system. This is what John Udell says on IT Conversations. This is where I go to for a lot of my teaching and learning inspiration. Can you believe it? If you want to know what Google's going to do next, if you want to hear the founders of Twitter talk about what they think Twitter is about, if you want to hear John Udell, first an English major, then a computer programmer, then a journalist, now an evangelist for Microsoft, if you want to hear him think aloud about the global nervous system, this is where you go, itconversations.org. And if you want to participate, you can do that too. They take this conference audio in and they farm it out in an open source distribution network and have people who are good at sound editing simply put the programs together. And then you get a check for $35, $40, not very much, a little walking around money. And you've also done something like Wikipedia, like a virtual choir. You've contributed to that human record. All right, I'm going to pause now here for a moment because you've been sitting and patiently listening for a while. I want to give you 20 seconds to stand up, re-oxygenate, and then sit back down for just a little bit. And I want to take you on a quick tour of how some of this is playing out at Virginia Tech right now. So 20 seconds, blood oxygenation. If you're on good terms with your person sitting next to you, you can rub his or her shoulders. If that gets out of hand, I'll have to call a stop. We'll go to a safe zone. Okay. So at this point, you may be thinking, well, that's the 30,000-foot level. These are very interesting ideas. How does this work out? How do you do this? And what about FERPA? Yeah, okay, what about FERPA? Yeah, we'll get to FERPA. We will not beat it to death with the FERPA stick. This is the report of a task force. Can you believe it? A committee drawn together from almost all of the major stakeholders at Virginia Tech. Just last spring, I kind of parachuted into the middle of this. I thought, whoa, we live in interesting times. Because we had all these people together, and the charge was, think about Virginia Tech in 2020. What's it going to be like? And at first we were heading towards a PDF. And we thought, oh dear, that doesn't really work. Virginia Tech 2020, here's your PDF. Fine, that's so 1994. No, we decided to put together a website. So faculty, staff, students, graduate students from across the university put together a website, which I'd like to share a little bit of right at this point. Invent the Future, Virginia Tech 2020. And it has a tag cloud, so you can go by section or across thematic unities. Not only text, but video and images and audio. You can make your way through it. Here's the, there are vice presidential welcomes, so you know it really happened. Task force members, and so forth, an executive summary, so don't worry. Oh, even further documents. It's a little library. It's a little cabinet of wonders. It's a little set of thoughts from each of the constituents in this task force. And in the middle is Invent the Future, which is where I was trying to synthesize and continue to push forward the thought that we were all engaged upon, because it's a pretty big responsibility if we really are in the middle of the largest increase in expressive capability in the history of the human race. We really ought to take some stock. And I began the section with one of my favorite quotations from Jerome Bruner back in 1966. Apparently no one was listening. Let's zoom in. The will to learn is an intrinsic motive. And that's a typo, which I can fix very easily. One that finds both its source and its reward in its own exercise. The will to learn becomes a problem only under specialized circumstances, like that of a school, where a curriculum is set, students confined, and a path fixed. The problem exists not so much in learning itself, but in the fact that what the school imposes often fails to enlist the natural energies that sustain spontaneous learning. Curiosity, a desire for competence, inspiration to emulate a model, and a deep sense of commitment to the web of social reciprocity. Our concern has been with how these energies may be cultivated in support of school learning. Well, there was no worldwide web of social reciprocity in 1966, but you can see why the idea mattered. The worldwide web of social reciprocity. How can we instantiate that in our teaching and learning? There are lots of different ways, but here are some things that we're trying to do right now. We have a residential college that came online just this fall. It's an honors residential college, about 300 students who are in a living learning community in a newly renovated dorm. And they made space in the dorm for people to be able to gather in lots of informal learning spaces and tried to encourage a kind of coffee house, the way Stephen Berlin Johnson talks about in Where Good Ideas Come From. And a few of us had an idea, what if there were a virtual space that also provided a kind of cyber-spatial equivalent of that coffee house, of that living learning community? And we turned to WordPress blogs. So each of the students in the Honors Residential College has his or her own blog site. And each of those blogs is aggregated up into what I have come to call a mother blog. And you see the tagline up here. It's probably not very visible from where you are, but it's narrate, curate, share, which is right here under the tab Why Blog. Tell your story. Shape your story. Share your story. And there are links because it's all online, and you can go off and keep exploring where this flourishing garden will take you. And you can see on the sidebar all these comments. You can see the contributors to the blog. But what you can't see or when things really get interesting. The mother blog gives you a front page to look at. It's a dynamic way in which the experience writes itself into being. The mother blog is blank until the students' own blogs begin to feed into it. This is one of those students' own blogs, a sophomore computer science major. The title of her blog, which is hers, the design of the blog, which is hers, that cluster of words in the header, which is hers. She even blogged about how she came to make it the way she did. Hunting for riveting conversations. And you can see in the side she's got links to the things that she's affiliated with, links to the blog she's following. She even has an RSS feed of her friends' activity on their blogs, knitting the conversation together. Every node is also a network. In fact, there's one here, if I can find it. Of course, when I try to find it, I won't see it. Now, it's not that one, it's another one. There was one where it was nothing but links of the people that she was working with in the, oh, here it is. She's talking about the colloquium that she's leading as one of the non-freshmen in the dorm. And she writes, over these past 3 weeks, soon to be 4, I've gotten to meet and start getting to know 12 amazing individuals, including 11 freshmen and 1 faculty member. I could spend paragraphs upon paragraphs gushing about how each of them brings something unique to our group. But to be honest, I think that the best way to paint a picture of everyone is to tell you to read their blogs. And you can see, learn about how one student views college as tiring, monotonous, but also a source of friendship, and so forth. Link. We take these links for granted. In this case, it's a profound indication of her own respect and pride for her own community. She has her own mother blog. Oh yes, we don't have a teacher-approved version of this software. It's the same thing that everyone has. And what she's done here is take all of the folks who are in her smaller colloquium and knit them into an aggregation blog, which then in turn gets knit into the larger aggregation of the main blog. And sometimes the creativity that is unleashed by chemical engineers, who also happen to be artists, is breathtaking. This is a blog called Catching Up. That header is drawn by the blogger. But as they say on television, wait, there's more. What is it to me? I am making this post for 2 reasons. 1, the fracas, that's what it's pronounced as, it's the Freshman Honors Residential College seminar, made me think about why I wanted to go into engineering and research. And 2, I felt the need to illustrate it. Not I was assigned to illustrate it, I was prompted to illustrate it. We're illustrating it as part of the final. All those are okay things, but look what flourished as a result. Welcome to school. This is what you need to know. But there must be more. I've already seen it. You'll understand soon. Here's her quest. There's her journey. There she is. But you see, it's online. It's not in the tubes, it's not in the office. So people comment. And people comment. Good luck with your dreams. Keep dreaming, and I'm going to try to, too. How did you do it? And then she says, this is how I did it. And then someone says, hey, I'm making a collection of interesting blogs from the Honors Residential College. I hope you don't mind that I am collecting yours. My collection is here. I don't mind, thank you. Terrific post, Reet, very thoughtful. Dr. Stevens showed this to me this morning, so they're even carrying around their computers in the residential context, showing each other these things that could only be done and shared online. yet are an intricate part of the fabric of their face-to-face interaction. I'm gobsmacked. Thank you for this soul food, I say. And because it's online, I send it to a colleague, Jill Seibel, a cell and microbiologist who's Associate Dean of the College of Science at Virginia Tech, who comes over and comments, crystal clear and beautiful. And Petey comes over days later. This is so cool. What program did you use to draw this? Corel Painter 11, digital watercolor for the color, and Sumi E for the lines. And I mentioned my colleague, Jill Seibel, a dean, a very busy person, as you can imagine, but also now a blogger. See her name? Her name is a link. Her name is a link. There's a poem there. Her name is a link. It's a link to this. This is her blog. It's a very funny story about active learning in her Sunday school class. Someone didn't quite say what she had hoped they were going to say. A blog post about did Watson and Crick deserve the prize, where she thinks about the varieties of work that lead to scientific innovation and how they don't all look the same. There's a great blog post about her own experience as a scientist and how it's not always been fun. A blog post about cells as the original digital devices. A blog post about what biologists do when they cook. And then this first one. This first one, which is truly breathtaking. I won't read it all to you, I'll just summarize. She's sitting at her desk writing a blog post with a set of experimental frogs at her side. And she thinks about her frogs and about how she experiments on them, that's what she does, and how she has to sacrifice them, meaning euthanize them, and that's what she does, and she believes in animal research, and yet today she writes this post having had to put her beloved family pet to sleep. Why would that matter and the frogs not as much? Or maybe the frogs matter more than she had suspected. She explores these ideas in front of her students, in front of the world. Why would one be a scientist? To think about what it means to be human, to try to further the human record, but not neatly and not without thinking. And this is Shanti, who's made her own little mother blog. She did it one day out of the blue. Look at it. She made this. She brought these together, including one blogger called A Drop in the Ocean, who, as a service to her fellow students, posts a webcomic every day. And this is the class that I'm teaching right now. And I have a secret weapon called tweeting augmentation. This is the third time I've experimented with this. I love it. I think I'll do it until I drop or the feed stops feeding. I have an embedded librarian. That's what that tweeting augmentation is about. My students tweet during class on the public timeline, so if they're really horsing around and not doing their work, the rest of the world sees it. Virtue is its own reward, and the world will not look kindly on you if you're being terribly rambunctious when you should be thinking. But a librarian across campus is in her office doing her work, and she's watching the Twitter stream. And as students express curiosity about something, or they have questions about something, or they're just thinking aloud about something, the librarian, being very stealthy, simply pops in a link to a book, or an article, or a journal, or a resource, or a photograph, or something on the World Wide Web. And last week, since I have a new partner in crime at Virginia Tech, I've been working with her, but my old partner in crime at Baylor still follows what I'm doing. At one point, I had 2 librarians tweeting during my class, which was great. I told my students that they should actually bring in gifts of flowers and fruit and things like this, because 2 librarians were embedded in their class. And they kind of looked at me, right? But think about that. Think about a curiosity Sherpa hovering invisibly in the room, feeding students things as they express even a moment's thought. Those are just a few examples. There are many more, and I hope that you'll take a look at our task force report, explore the resources we have up there, and comment. It's public. It's on the World Wide Web. We want people to say things like, yeah, we can't even get wireless in the classroom. We want people to push back, and we want people to link to what they're doing as well. This task force report, Inventing the Future, is about much more than our future at Virginia Tech. It should be about something that's shared. A couple of other examples, and then I'll wrap it up. The Science Education Alliance is a project sponsored by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And what they're trying to do is help students in an undergraduate research framework become more interested in STEM and STEM-H topics. And a couple of my colleagues at Baylor said, we'd like to get more attention and funding for this. And I said, go online. And they did go online. And you can click on any individual student's set of posts, and you can learn how they learned over the course of 2 semesters. Works for graduate students. Here's a poster child, Blogging on the Brain, by a student who was a graduate fellow in the Academy for Teaching and Learning, which was the program I led at Baylor. Her name is Hillary Blakely. Her domain is hillaryblakely.net. And she, through her own blog, became an official Society for Neuroscience neuroblogger. She got what I think most people would think is a postdoc dream fellowship at Boston University, in which she's a postdoc faculty fellow working 40% of the time on her own lab work and 60% of the time designing a curriculum in neuroscience for undergraduates. And she didn't get that just because of her blog, but when she sent in her application materials, they included a link, because her name is a link as well. And this is the faculty staff development seminar that some folks here at USC Upstate were part of, gloriously part of. This was the mother blog at Baylor. It was a journey through what one writer calls the resonance frequency of all of the early thoughts about teaching and learning and computing, where they really did believe that it was more like a choir, or could be, and less like a set of tubes. And we read these readings together, how old-fashioned. We sit around in a circle with books, how old-fashioned. And then we put our responses, our resources, up online. And then each group then knits itself up and up and up into further aggregation. Another favorite site. Race, Class, Gender, Running, Teaching, Doing. This is the interim assistant director of the Academy for Teaching and Learning at Baylor, narrating her own work. Which leads us to the conclusion. The task is the same now as it ever has been. Familiar, thrilling, unavoidable. We work with all our myriad talents to expand our media of expression to the full measure of our humanity. Or not. We have before us a set of entirely momentous choices. We have possibilities that really outstrip even the imagination of the people who spend their days and nights thinking about nothing else. It's exciting, it's unexpected, it's messy, hard to manage, easier to love. This is the task. This is what I am grateful to be engaged in with you here, with Cindy, with the program she leads, with all the people I've been meeting, and with everyone in higher education. If we say no to this task, we're saying no to our students at a time when the answer yes has never been more powerful. Thanks for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.